Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Thank you all for tuning in. Would you like to know if your kid will be successful, or your kids? Well, a recent study found that the best predictor of success in young adults' 20s was whether they did chores at a young age. Why are non-voters younger? And what the heck do these two things have to do with each other? Well, that's why we're here today, and we're so glad that you've joined us. But of course, if we're going to talk about parenting and how society's gone wrong, well, we couldn't begin a conversation without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
What a combination.
Uh-huh.
So maybe if you make your kids do chores, they'll vote more often?
Whoa.
We are talking about children, right? Of the human species, not goats?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Human children.
I don't like to assume there.
It might work with goats. I don't know.
Okay.
But the study was on humans.
Okay.
Just so that everybody's on the same page. So let's get into it here. The Sunday, August 19th, New York Times. That's right. August 19th. Yes, I know that we're now in December. Hopefully you're listening in December. But we've had this on our radar for a while, and we've just been looking for the right opportunity to do it. And we finally got around to it today. So you're welcome to look up the article. It's entitled Happy Children Do Chores. Simple. Children who help more at home feel a larger sense of obligation and connectedness to their parents, and that connection helps them, whether it's life's stressful moments. In other words, it helps them be happier. In a survey of 1,001 American adults, 75% said they believed that regular chores made kids, quote, more responsible, and 63% said chores teach kids, quote, important life lessons, end quote. Yet while 82%, Lance, reported having some regular chores growing up, only 56% of those with children said they required them to do chores. Between 2001 and 2005, a team of researchers from UCLA's Center on the Everyday Lives of Families recorded 1,540 hours of footage of 32 middle-class families. A lot of footage.
Mm-hmm.
And these were dual-earner families with at least 2 children going about their business in L.A. They found that the parents did most of the housework and intervened quickly when the kids had trouble completing a task. Children in 22 families of those 32 that were surveyed made it a practice to ignore or resist their parents' request for help. In 8 families, the parents didn't actually ask children to do much of anything. And that leaves 2 families, Lance, 2 families in which kids meaningfully helped out. One of the young researchers involved called working on the study, quote, the very purest form of birth control ever devised, end quote. What do you least like about parenting? Well, that was the question that the author of this article asked 1,050 parents. The response, the most common, was by far discipline is what parents liked least, which included enforcing chores and other responsibilities. Other answers included enforcing the rules, especially about household chores, and the challenge of, quote, chores and disciplining a child, end quote, and having to nag kids to do simple chores. Those were among the top results when asking parents an open-ended question about what they like least about parenting. Finally, Richard Weisbord, a Harvard psychologist, and colleagues of his surveyed more than 10,000 students from 33 middle and high schools around the country and found that almost 80% said they valued their own happiness over caring for others. Most thought their parents would agree.
Okay. So what you got for me? I mean, you read a lot there.
What do you think, Lance? You know, the author points out, because I'll say this, because this is what Lance is about to say.
You talked about children.
This is just more data that tells us what we already know.
Right?
Right? Or what we should know. So which one? I'll leave it to you. I mean, you were both a child and you are currently still a parent.
Well, parents don't do their job.
Is that what it comes down to?
Sure. No, I mean, it really is. I mean, young children are children, and they look to their parents for a lot of guidance. And parents, it seems like some parents, it is a tough line to walk between encouraging your children and being a disciplinarian. You know, there is something to that old phrase that parents used to use all the time that I don't hear much anymore. This hurts me more than it hurts you. And the kid's like, yeah, right. You're not the one who didn't get to go to the movie with the friends. You're not the one who didn't get the toy that you wanted. You're not the one who has to clean the bathroom when it's all stinky and dirty. But it is hard for a parent to sit there and tell your child and see your child not enjoy something, be it discipline or an activity that you're making them do. However, your job is to produce adults who take responsibility and who have a work ethic and who are nice to other people. And that means that sometimes you have to, I don't want to say hurt because but you have to make your children uncomfortable, and you have to make your children maybe not like you in the moment. Okay. And I think my wife always said it best to my daughter. She goes, I'm not your friend. I'm your mom. And I hear too many conversations now with moms who say, well, my daughter's my best friend, or daughters who say, well, my mom's my best friend. Well, I don't know. I think that's a little bit backwards, and I know what they're looking for, but my daughters talk to my wife all the time about advice. That doesn't mean it's friendship necessarily, but there's a respect there that their mother has gone through things, and their mother was always there to support them when things weren't going well for them. And so they still turn to her to get advice, even though they're both young, adult, professional women. So I don't put the problem on the children. I put the problem on the adults who don't follow through. You know, and that's why you should never discipline in anger. You know, I'm so mad at you. You can't da 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 da. Okay. Because there were times as a young parent, my wife would do that, and I'd look at her, and then she'd come back and she'd say, well, I think I'm going to let them. I said, you can't. And she goes, well, what do you mean? You told them yesterday they couldn't do such and so for a week. You have to stick to that. She goes, yeah, but I was mad. I said, too bad. Because I said, if you don't stick to it when they're 2 or 3, they're going to think as they get older that you don't mean it when they're teenagers. And that was something that I won't say we ever fought over, but we discussed an awful lot. And I stuck very firmly to with my wife. And it was hard for her to do that. And the other thing that was hard for her to do was because my wife's somewhat of a perfectionist at times, to let the children do their chores and let it be done, even though it wasn't done to her satisfaction. But it was as good as a 5-year-old could do, right, or a 7-year-old could do,
or as reasonable as to expect
could do. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
So, I mean, those are some of my, comments there. And that's why I said it comes back to the parents, because the child is the child. The child's going to do whatever they can do. They're going to constantly test the limits of the adults.
It's how they learn about the world.
And that's exactly right.
It's literally a built-in.
And if they've gotten away with it at home, be it with parents, grandparents, whoever is in charge of them, then they do it out in public as well.
So that study I cited at the beginning, and I don't want to get hung up on it because I think the author says this. She says, quote, I don't want to make too much of a small study, and there's really no need. All that research in this area is confirm what we already know. But the study I was citing actually was focused on children who did household tasks starting at ages 3 and 4. So your 2 and 3 was very, very close in terms of what the study was finding. And my point in bringing that up is it's reaffirming what, again, the problem is not that parents think kids should be doing this, because that's not the problem. I mean, we found out 75% of adults think that. So we're not having to convince parents, hey, they need to do chores. We're having to convince them to follow through on making them do it.
Right. If you say you have to pick up your toys before you go to bed, well, when they cry and pout and moan and everything else and don't pick up their toys, do you send them to bed and then pick up their toys? You didn't follow through. Now, does that mean they might fall asleep there and still not pick up their toys? Yep. You pick them up, you take them to bed, and then the next day, before they can do anything, guess what? They have to pick up their toys. You don't go pick up their toys for them just because they fell asleep because they cried themselves to sleep because they wouldn't pick up their toys.
Mm-hmm.
Now can you can you go to bed that night and know that there are toys still strewn all over wherever you let your children play? That's what you should do, because then they're going to wake up and they're going to think, oh, I went to sleep last night and I got up and, hey, I don't have to pick up my toys this morning. So then the next time you tell them to pick up their toys, well, why should I? If I don't, eventually they're going to get picked up. But if you put them to bed because they fell asleep because they got mad and cried themselves to sleep, and then they get up the next morning and after they eat breakfast, before they can do anything else, they have to pick up their toys. They're going to learn, gosh, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm still going to have to pick up my toys. But that's on the parent, hanging in there and doing the tough thing. And most of the time they don't want to do that, or they'll cry in front of company. Oh, I don't want my child to cry. People think I'm a bad parent. I don't want him to throw a temper. Oh, let them. And then follow through. I mean, I say that as an older person. I get upset when I visit with somebody and I see them give in to their child. I'm like, boy, you're going to have a tough time when they become a teenager. I don't say that. I just think that to myself. And I was a pretty strong disciplinarian. But at the same time, my daughters, like, we were at a track meet and I was coaching and my daughter was there. She was in college and she was hanging out with me. And there was this little boy who was throwing rocks out onto the track. He thought it was kind of funny. He was like 3 or 4 and he was picking up little pebbles and throwing it out through the chain link fence onto the track. And my daughter was just kind of looking at him. And then all of a sudden the dad came over and yanked his son by the arm and got down on his knees in his son's eyes and said, hey, you don't throw things on the track. That's dangerous for the runners, and I don't want you to do it again. And my daughter hit me in the back and she goes, oh, at least there's somebody out there, Dad, who knows how to parent. That's what she expected, and that's what I would do to them. They didn't always fulfill it, and there were punishments, and there were tears, and there were, it's like, you have the right to be mad. But you know what? You can go to your room and be mad, and when you think you can behave, you can come back downstairs with the rest of us.
Because the problem is, and that example's a little bit decent in the fact that then when it comes down to it and it really matters, right? Because use the toy example. They leave their toys out, you pick them up for them. No big deal. You're being nice, right? But then the problem is when it's something really important that maybe involves their safety or the safety of somebody else, and you tell them to do something and they think they don't have to listen. Now you're not talking anymore about, oh, they didn't pick up their toys and the house is messy. We're talking about they hurt themselves or somebody else. And maybe it's the kind of thing that can't be taken back. It's not, oh, well, they'll just get better. I mean,
and I use that as, that's how you teach responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Responsibility, as you said, in anything. And when people say, well, what do you have 3 and 4-year-olds do? They can pick up their own toys. They can carry their clothes to their room. If you fold their clothes, they can. I'm not telling you that a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old should mop the floor.
Right. Or make dinner every night.
Or make dinner every night or, cut up the vegetables with a sharp object. But there are things that you can make them do that teaches them responsibility and to teach them that they are part of a group, that the world doesn't revolve around them because they think it does. I mean, if you look at child studies, they think the world, that's what, and you have to teach them that no, we're all in this together. While I'm doing this, you're going to be doing this. So you also have to not only hold the child responsible, but you also have to model it for them.
Yep.
And do things as the parent to say, see, I'm doing my part. Now you do your part. And now, hey, guess what? Now it's all done. We can sit down and watch TV together, or we can go play ball together, or we can go for a bike ride together.
We'll end it on this. The author goes on to say, sports and homework are not get out of chores free cards. The goal, after all, is not to raise children we can coddle into the Ivy League. The goal is to raise adults. Notice the precise vocabulary choice there. The goal is to raise adults who can balance a caring role in their families and communities with whatever life achievement goals they choose. Chores teach that balance. They're not just chores, they're life skills. And at this point, you're all wondering, well, great. I'm one of those people who hates discipline. So now what? What is the solution to all this? I agree. Kids should do chores. How do I make that happen? Or maybe you're not a parent yet and you're thinking, yeah, I want to do that, but I know I won't like discipline. Well, getting children to do chores is an incredibly simple 2-step process. Notice simple, not easy. Insist and persist is the author's advice here. Insist and persist until the chore is done. Accept no excuses. Don't worry if you must repeat yourself again and again and again. If you're spending more time getting the child to do this job than it would take to do it yourself, then you're doing it right. Getting children to do chores without nagging, that's an entirely separate endeavor. Right now, the goal is the chore. It's not about,
Amen.
It's not about making your life easier.
I didn't read the article, right?
Yeah, you didn't. Yep.
Isn't that what I said?
Yeah.
If I didn't say it, that's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
With all my rigmarole. That's what I was trying to say.
Sums it up, right? It's sadly there isn't a get out of jail free card here with as it pertains to the parent. Interestingly, while I didn't have a lot of household chores, I grew up in a family where both parents were engaged in running their own business. So there was a lot of, and even having started kind of quote unquote my first business at a young age, there was a lot of just this understanding that, someday there's not going to be anybody there. You're going to face tough things and it's either you're going to do them or you're not. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, they're just not going to get done. So, I had a steer in 4-H and then I went on to do cattle, and it's like, well, this steer's your responsibility. And if you don't scoop the poop, no one's going to, and then it's going to get sick and then it might die, so you're either going to do it or you're not, but there's nobody else here who's going to come scoop this for you kind of thing. So it's all that mentality of at some point in life, we're all faced with, I love this part right here. Because some people might think, well, what about an allowance? Maybe that'll make it easier, an incentive. The author says maybe, but if you're trying to teach kids to share the responsibility of a home, paying them for chores is not the right message. And think about this. After all, no one pays you to unload your own dishwasher, and no one ever will.
I never got an allowance growing up, always had chores to do, and I never gave my children an allowance. However, if my children needed something for an activity, then I would provide it.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. You're just out of luck.
No, right.
Yeah. The only way, and the author doesn't get into this, allowances are kind of a separate thing. I think her point is the allowance debate could be separate, but it shouldn't be tied to you get an allowance because you do chores.
Because like I said, you're part of a group.
Right. You're doing chores because you live in this house and you don't have to pay to be here. So you're going to help take care of the place because you are a drain on resources, and we're willing to do as the adults, right? The bulk of the work, because that's how it is, but you're going to do some of it. Because someday you're going to have your own house, and unless you want it to be a pigsty and fall down around you, house, home, apartment, whatever, you're going to have to do some basic things. If you don't want to get sick, you're going to have to do the dishes, because if you just leave them to pile up for all eternity and all kinds of critters decide to feast on them, you're probably not going to be very healthy. So Okay, Lance, what are we doing here?
I'm there.
What's the goal? Because we got something else to talk about next. But before we do that, tell people, what is True Chat trying to accomplish with,
you mean our
with
mission?
these kind of conversations?
Well, our mission here at True Chat is that we want to try to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
Woo woo.
There you go.
I think we're doing it.
It's that simple.
I always think we're doing it, though. So if we're not, ethics@truechat.org. Send an email, ethics@truechat.org. Let us know your thoughts. Do your kids do chores? Answer that question. Pause right now. Go do it at TrueChat.org, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, all the socials.
And if they don't, it's never too late to start. It's just harder if they're older.
That's right.
If they're already past the ages of 3 and 4, start, because it's going to doesn't get easier. It's going to get harder the older they are.
Yep. Doesn't matter how old. Get it going now,
and you're doing them a favor for the future. Mm-hmm. Not only yourself, not only society, but you're doing them a favor to teach them that responsibility.
So let's talk about, I mentioned this in the beginning, Lance, and people I'm sure are still wondering, what do these have to do? We already kind of knew, right, that young people, non-voters tend to be younger, but let's talk about this article and what kind of insight it gives us to this.
Well, the day after the election, or a couple weeks after the election, Friday, November 23rd, in the Wall Street Journal, it says that non-voters are likely to be younger and less wealthy. Not only are they younger and less wealthy, but they're generally less educated, less partisan than country's voters as a whole. This was done as in 23,000 interviews of non-voters conducted on or before Election Day by AP Votecast. So it said that 37% of non-voters are ages 18 to 29. So 1 out of every 3 people who don't vote fall into that age group. So as far as young people, that's quite a staggering amount. More than half of non-voters, 55%, make less than $50,000. So not only is it young people, but it's also people who don't make a lot of money comparatively. And only 20% of non-voters have a college degree, meaning that most non-voters are less educated than the average voter. Why do you think that is? They don't really go into this in this article at all, giving any idea as to why this is. They're just listing these numbers.
Where's this article from, by the way?
The Friday, November 23rd Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
So it's just a piece here, and it's just giving a lot of factual information.
I'll give you, if you want my reaction, I'll tell you why.
I mean, why?
I'll tell you why I think it is in a minute, but
typically younger, not making as much money, and less educated.
Mm-hmm. And less partisan.
Don't
forget the one good thing in everything that you just said.
Does it matter if they're partisan or not? If they're not voting?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I guess that's why I skipped over it. I don't care whether they're partisan or not.
They're not voting. Right.
They're not voting. So what
but if we
difference
get
does
them
it
to
make?
vote, then it would be good.
Well, then they'd probably become partisan because they'd have to pick a side.
So my initial reaction to this was, these are the people that need to be voting the most. I mean, I think we should all vote. I've said that before. I think the more people that vote, the less we have to complain about. Now, being an educated voter is a different topic, and that's one that it makes me so nervous to think about the lack of understanding of what people are voting on. And I'll be the first one to admit that I don't always feel like I have a great grasp on things before Election Day. It's just the truth. A lot of times with the size and scope of our governments these days, there's a lot of things to vote on. And real live education about those issues and not just voting along party lines, I think is pretty important, but that's separate. I'm just thinking these are the people, right, who need to be voting. If they're not very wealthy, if they're not very well educated, the stats tell us those are the most likely to either stay stuck in a cycle of poverty or get stuck in a cycle of poverty. And one of the ways out is by making sure that we have a system that works not for all of us, but for each of us. And in doing so, providing opportunity to be successful. And if you don't have those opportunities, one way to help fix it is go vote. That is within your control, and so that's my reaction.
But
the initial thought there is they need to go vote.
But everybody said that and to them, and yet they're still choosing not to.
So why?
Why are they choosing not to? I don't disagree. Yes, these are exactly the people who should be voting. The disenfranchised are the ones who, the ones who aren't voting are typically the ones who should be. But they've heard that their whole life. I mean, I'm assuming most of them have been in public school.
Right.
And they have heard about voting and they're
not doing it though. From
elementary school on, they have voted on things in the classroom and school wide based on, school colors, mascot, what's going to be in the lunchroom. They've been taught the democratic process all through school. Yet when they get out on their own, they tend not to participate. Why are those who make less money, less educated, and younger tend not to participate in the system?
I got your answer. So here's how I'm going to tie it together for you. Okay. Because everybody, hopefully you're still paying attention and you're still wondering how the heck are these two things related. Maybe you're starting to get an idea though. We're going back to this Harvard psychologist and colleagues who surveyed more than 10,000 students from 33 middle and high schools around the country and found that almost 80% said they valued their own happiness over caring for others. Most thought their parents would agree. If I don't care about anybody else and I'm out for myself, sure, there's a case to be made that you would go vote to protect your own interests. But if you don't have any money to protect, raise taxes, or don't, or lower tax. I don't have any money anyway, so I think that if you don't have a sense of community or any sense of what the nation has afforded you at your local, state, and federal level, why you're better off than the rest of the world, even if you're not doing well, why would you vote? I mean, who cares? Just taking my time and I have to try to learn about these things. And, it's an inconvenience. If I'm going to be an informed voter, it's an even bigger inconvenience. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter anyway.
See, that's the biggest one. They just think it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And they're not putting two and two together that because they're not voting, it's like this, then nobody's going to listen to them. But it's like, the executive director of the National Association of Latino Elected Officials said his organization's poll of Latino voters found half of them said they were never contacted by a candidate or campaign in 2018. They were being ignored. Okay, but why are they being ignored? Because they're not voting. It goes hand in hand. People are like, well, nobody's talking to me, so I'm not going to bother to vote. They don't represent me, so I'm not going to bother to vote. Okay.
They don't represent you because you don't vote.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy because I'm not going to worry about what you think or doing things for your group or your income level or your working status because you don't go vote. So you're not going to cost me my job. The way to get people to listen to you and to care about your concerns is to go vote.
I said that when I was working on the Democratic presidential campaign. I had a voter who told me, why would I go vote? It's a bunch of old white dudes anyway. And I said, that's why. They're not going to represent you because you don't go vote.
Right.
And I know they're doing things to make it hard for you to vote. And I know it's not fair. And I know all this. But at the end of the day, there's nothing right now that's going to stop you from going over to the voting booth and putting your name in and hopefully encouraging some other people from your community to do so that you're better represented. You're not represented because you don't vote. And
I'm going to get on my soapbox for about 30 seconds here.
Okay.
But this is why we're America. If you don't vote, you want to talk about patriotic, you want to talk about standing for the national anthem and all of that. I'm sorry, folks. Hooey. Okay. That's not what makes us America. What makes us America is that you have the right to vote. People have fought and died for you to have the right to vote, to have a voice in your government. If you don't take that voice, then other people are going to tell you what to do. That is something most countries in the world, most people in the world do not have the right to do. That's what makes us different as a nation and as a people. And if you don't bother to vote, I'm sorry. And you can comment to our ethics department, but I would say that is the epitome of being un-American, is if you don't vote, because that's why we've had all of these struggles for over 200 years, is because we wanted a voice in our government. We wanted no taxation without representation. We wanted a voice in English Parliament. We were told no, and we fought for the right to have a voice. And so if you're going to sit on the sideline and not participate in the democratic process for whatever reason, that is the most un-American thing that you can do in my book.
Especially if you're going to go and complain about the way things are.
I'm going to even go further. I don't care. Complain, not complain. If you're not voting, don't worry about whether or not I'm standing up for the national anthem or singing the words. We need to vote, people. That's what makes us different from every other country, from the majority of countries in the world. Yes, there are other people that have the right to vote. There are other democracies, but most places
our system
don't. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to bother to vote, don't tell me how wonderful America is and how I'm being unpatriotic if I don't stand up for a song. Sorry, folks. And I do stand up and I am respectful, but that's not patriotism. Patriotism is going to the polls and voting anytime you have an opportunity and having a voice in what's happening to you, because that's why we've fought the wars and done everything we can to be America, and the flag and all that other stuff is because people wanted the right to vote.
I've said this before, and I think I'll say it again as
I'm
a
done.
highlight.
I know. The phone line may be going up, and I may not ever be asked back. Okay, but there's nothing to me that's less American than people not voting, and yet the majority of Americans don't.
And the majority of Americans do receive a benefit from this great system that we have. And I think it comes down to as simple as, and this isn't, as Lance pointed out, this is no attack on the song, the national anthem. I stand too. But if as many people voted as stood for the national anthem, we wouldn't have this conversation.
Exactly.
And that's my point, is that's where the priorities are mixed up. Obviously, getting people to stand doesn't equate to getting them to vote, or more people would be voting. So let's get them to vote. And I bet you this, I want somebody to do this survey, Lance. Let's survey of people that stand for the national anthem, what percentage vote? And then let's do this way. Of the people that vote, what percentage stand for the national anthem? Because I guarantee you that second percentage is way higher than the first. And on that note, let us know your comments, because you do have the right to have a voice. That's part of what we live for here in this country. And there's a reason that it's the First Amendment, at least in my opinion of what I've read. There's a reason it comes first above everything else, is the right to have a voice. So please exercise that, because, it is possible that you might say something, that you might have an argument that gets Lance or I to rethink this or look at it in a different way. Okay? We're just two people, right? I mean, this is part of the open, honest, and respectful conversation.
And I'm using part of that First Amendment and freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I'm telling you how I feel. Mm-hmm. If you feel differently, please let me know and tell me why.
And we're inviting you to.
You might change my opinion.
Right. Yes. So please, don't you dare go away from this show and rail and not take to social media and let us know your thoughts at TrueChat, ORG, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Or if you agree with us, you can let us know that too. But typically when people say something, it's because they're upset. So, and that's okay. That's all right. We want to hear it. So you can find True Chat Podcast anywhere that fine podcasts are found. Like where, Lance? Where are our places that people can find?
Oh, Stitcher.
Yep.
I haven't done this in a while.
Oh,
there's Stitcher and there's Spotify.
Yes, your favorite.
Spotify. Apple Podcasts, and other fine outlets that carry podcasts.
Excellent. Thank you all for tuning in for The State of Us on True Chat. I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
We'll see you next time on The State of Us. Be the change.